Hi, I'm Caden here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 18 prediction episode for the final week of the 2024 NFL season. As we kind of hinted on last week, but never for sure said, there will be no recap episode this week. Only two games really worth talking about last week was, of course, the Packers at Vikings as well as the Commanders at Falcons, which, don't get me wrong, both were amazing games, but just talking about two games didn't overly seem worth it, and it just seemed kind of awkward to try to fit that into this episode. So no recap episode this week, just this prediction episode that you'll be seeing going up Thursday morning, or maybe even a little earlier because there is no Thursday football game. Maybe we'll put it up Wednesday morning just like we did last week when we had the Christmas games, but you'll be seeing this sometime between Wednesday and Sunday of next week. Just as long as they're before the games, that's all that really matters. But moving on, just a quick update on Cal and I's head-to-head pick'em before we move into any sort of predictions. We both had not that great of weeks last week, considering it was a 16-game schedule. But we both did pick up some points. I picked up 12 total points. Callan picked up 10 total points, putting us at a total of me with 188 and Callan with 165. So that pretty well locks in at this point who's going to be the regular season champion, being me. But we'll see what happens with these final predictions. Lots of kind of toss-up games considering how many people have been eliminated, and even concerning the teams who are still fighting for things here and there in their playoff position, or maybe even to make the playoffs. But like I say every week, it all comes down to what happens in the playoffs in our pick'em game and in real life, of course. Shocker that those go hand in hand. But yeah, so looking good for me for the regular season, but all can change very quickly. So now moving on to real life football and the real life playoff scenarios. Right now, I'm going to pop up a little graphic that I got off of ESPN. Very helpful and very insightful. But just a couple of things I wanted to point out before we actually went into talking about the games that we're going to talk about today. Starting in the NFC, the only big, real, reasonable changes that we might see is we might see a spot flip between number 3 and 4 seeds, with the Rams currently holding it, but Tampa could take it over if they were to win and the Rams were to lose. And the same situation in the 6 and 7 seed, with the Commanders holding it, but if the Commanders were to lose and the Packers were to win, they would actually move up to the 6 seed and the Commanders would move to that 7 seed. So apart from a very small chance of Atlanta slipping in, with Atlanta beating the Panthers and then not both, but the Bucks losing to the Saints, the NFC playoff picture is pretty well set right now. As for the AFC side of things, we could see a couple of flops, mainly in who will win the AFC North. Baltimore is very much looking like the favorites because all they have to do is beat the Browns at home. But the Steelers do hold a chance if they are able to beat the Bengals, and the Browns do end up beating the Ravens. And then a little bit of flip-flop type things can happen in that 5, 6, and 7 seed. And really the 7 seed is the only thing still up for grabs, with all of the Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, and Cincinnati Bengals having a chance at that 7 seed. So now to move on and kind of talk about which games specifically we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about all the games that have a win and in scenario, for lack of a better term, for winning and they get the certain seed or the higher seed or wherever they want to be, or whatever, however you want to say it. But we will be talking about those main games. So we will jump straight into that with both Saturday games. 2 Saturday games this week, both of them being the aforementioned AFC North matchups. Starting with the afternoon game of the Cleveland Browns heading to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. And we start by agreeing this one. We both have the Ravens, and Callan has them as his lock.
Yeah, I think the Ravens are going to take this one pretty easily. They're favored by 18 points on the FanDuel Sportsbook. That is the most points I think I've seen a team favored by this year. So the Browns are likely to play Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who is just a young, raw prospect. He's not really pro ready, but with them being eliminated, it's best for them to see what they got at the quarterback position. So it's likely that's who starts for Cleveland, and because of that, they're going to probably more than likely get demolished because he's just an inexperienced prospect, and like I say, he's just not quite pro ready yet, and he might eventually become a nice backup quarterback, a nice veteran, but not quite there yet. And another reason the Ravens are going to win is because of that running game and Derrick Henry, and it has been unstoppable all season. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson has formed quite the duo, and Lamar Jackson was looking for his third MVP.
Third in a row.
Third in a row.
I think
it's his third for sure.
Third overall. Second in a row, third overall.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see what kind of performance he puts on for the last showing for MVP efforts. And then also the Browns, I don't think are going to have Myles Garrett because while they're eliminated, the Browns aren't playing for anything, and the Ravens are playing for the AFC North crown, which gives them the 3 seed and an automatic home game. So I believe that the Ravens are going to play tough, and it's going to be really difficult for the Browns to win this one.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Not much to say here. One kind of silver lining, or I guess benefit of the doubt I will give the Browns is the Browns did win their first matchup against the Ravens, so they do have some sort of formula in order to play well against the Ravens, and they're already eliminated in playing spoiler, which especially when going against a divisional opponent, sometimes playing spoiler gives you almost as much motivation as playing for your own spot somewhere in the playoffs. It's really weird, but I mean, if you look back, it happens more than you'd think that these worser teams come and play spoiler against the better teams in the playoff time and while the playoff bracket's being molded. But even with that being said, nonetheless, I don't think that there's any chance that it does come to fruition in this scenario. I think that the Ravens are just going to go out there and absolutely dominate. I think that this game's going to be over before halftime, and the Ravens will be sitting their starters by about halftime or maybe the third quarter just to make sure that they can rest up and be healthy and more than anything not get seriously injured. So we'll see if the Browns can prove us wrong on that one, but I think the Ravens have a very high chance of winning this game and the AFC North. So now moving on to the next Saturday game, the Saturday night game, we have the Cincinnati Bengals who are fighting for a playoff spot of their own at the 7 seed, as well as the Pittsburgh Steelers, who at this point will know whether or not they're still fighting for an AFC North title. But nonetheless, we do agree in this one. We both have the Steelers, and pretty close matchup here. It's almost the dead opposite of this other AFC North matchup. While the first AFC North matchup we talked about is just going to be a complete blowout, and the only chance is the craziest spoiler you've ever seen, this one has a lot closer of a game. It has a lot more on the line for not only the Steelers, but the Bengals. And in fact, I'd say there's even more on the lines for the Bengals because, as I just mentioned a second ago, the Steelers will know if they still have a chance at the AFC North. And of course, if the Browns are able to play that spoiler and the Steelers have a chance at the AFC North, then they have a lot more to play for all of a sudden. The tides kind of change right there. But it might get to a point where they're like, our seed is set. I don't know if there's a chance. I can't remember for sure if they can fall out of the 5 seed or not. I think there is a small chance if the Chargers win and they lose. But the Bengals, it's their only chance if they win. It's not like, well, we've already made the playoffs, we're already established. They not only need to win, but then they need 2 other teams to lose. So they are fighting for so much here. But I think that the Steelers realize that they want to stay locked in at that 5. They think with their record, they should win their division and not be the 5 seed, but it's the way it's going to fall in our predictions at least. So I think that they have a lot better of a game than they've had the past few weeks. They've came out hot in the past few weeks and then had very poor second halves. So I think we see a much more complete game from Pittsburgh here and kind of like a lock-in time for the playoffs. Like, we got to get our stuff right in this game because you practically are playing a playoff team in the Cincinnati Bengals here. So if you want to get ready for the playoffs, no better way than facing a playoff team in the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I think it's going to be definitely the most entertaining matchup of the day. That's for sure. But I think that the Steelers win this one because, well, they didn't play that well on Christmas Day. They got beat pretty single-handedly by the Chiefs. And I think that they make up for that and have a lot better game this time around, and especially because they're trying to keep the Bengals out of the playoffs, where they know how dangerous Joe Burrow can be if you give him a chance. So I think they try to keep Joe Burrow out of the playoffs, and I think they play a really tough game. And I think Russell Wilson puts together a complete game and bounces back. Now, I know I've said that a couple of weeks now in a row where I expected him to kind of play as more uh, Seattle Seahawks style, and he's played more Denver Broncos style in the last couple of weeks. But I really think that this is the week that he snaps out of it and he gets the Steelers this win and possibly even the AFC North crown, but at the very least, that number 5 spot in the wild card.
Yeah, if they continue to play like they have the past few weeks and they lose to the Bengals here, I'm real nervous as a Steelers fan going into playoffs, to say the least. I'm certainly starting to scratch my head on where the greatness that you saw about 4 or 5 weeks ago from this team went. But now moving down the list quite a bit and just barely past the technical win and in team for this matchup in the Washington Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys, in which we do split, we're going to move on to actually the Chicago Bears at the Green Bay Packers. Thought we better still talk about the Packers just because it's tradition. You can't break tradition. We got to stick with it. So though, like I said, the Commanders are technically in control of the 6th seed in the win and in team, if they are to lose that game, the Packers are in a prime opportunity to move up to that 6th seed. So for our predictions in the Chicago Bears heading to Green Bay to take on the Packers, we agree. We both have the Packers in this one. And to be honest, I actually made this pick assuming that the Packers were starting their backups. So I have so much confidence in the starters of the Packers, especially being in Lambeau, that I thought that even if Malik Willis and whichever running backs and whichever receivers they want to throw out there and whatever secondary in the defense they want to throw out there, I still think that they beat Chicago in what may have been a closer game, but still a winning game for the Packers. So considering the fact that these teams play at the same time, these teams being the Commanders and the Packers, then the Packers will likely start all their starters. I see them pretty handily taking care of Chicago here and at least giving themselves a chance to move back up into that 6th seed and not having to be the real fringe team at the 7th seed.
Yeah, I would like the Packers to win and get that 6th seed, but it looks more likely it's the 7th seed because when you talk about the Commanders and Cowboys, the Cowboys have been terrible at home this year, and they're at Dallas Stadium. So look for the Commanders to get a dominant win over the Cowboys, and look for the Packers to get a dominant win over the Bears and continue their ownership over Chicago. Where even though this is Chicago's big game of the year, it is their last chance to make an impression. I think there's just too much bad stuff has happened in Chicago this year, and they just are ready to call it a season. And I think because of that, Green Bay gets an easy win over Chicago and puts himself in prime position to at least obtain that 6th seed if possible. But I would really like to go into the playoffs with some momentum and a little bit of a win streak here. It'd be really nice to see Josh Jacobs get back on track after having a fumble in last week's game. It would be nice to see him hold on to the ball and for the whole game. And also look for the defense to get a couple more turnovers where they were only able to get one Sam Darnold interception last week. And even though it was a key interception in the near comeback, it just wasn't quite enough. So look for more turnovers of Caleb Williams this week and for the Packers to get a few more sacks to add onto their total for this season as well.
Did Love have a pick?
No, I don't think so.
So Love continued the interceptionless streak, but the Vikings also continued the streak of having a turnover in every game as that fumble straight that Callan mentioned. So considering we couldn't get the pick, it's a good thing we did get that fumble because that would have been tough to lose that streak so late in this season. But it might be even tougher to lose it in the next game, but we'll be talking about that here in a little bit. But moving down one game on our list to the New Orleans Saints heading to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. And we both have the Buccaneers in this one, and I even have them as my lock. I just don't really see a world where the Bucs don't win this game. To be honest, I was just kind of talking about this with Callan. Sheerly looking at the playoff picture, I almost want the Bucs to lose and the Falcons to win that division just because I am a hell of a lot more confident going into Atlanta and facing the Falcons than going into Tampa Bay and facing the Buccaneers if the Vikings are to fall to that 5 seed, which is looking slightly more likely, especially being in Detroit, but always got to keep faith on that side of things. But I just don't see that happening with how beat up the Saints are right now and how questionable Spencer Rattler has been playing. I don't see a world where New Orleans can just go into Tampa Bay and absolutely shatter the Bucs seasons like that. So after the smoking that they put on the Carolina Panthers last week, I think the Bucs keep that momentum rolling all the way into the playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Baker Mayfield throwing for 5 touchdowns last week. I look for him to continue his streak of throwing 3 touchdown passes in a row, where I think he's done that in, I want to say, 5 straight games, 4 or 5 straight.
Jeez.
He's had three plus touchdown passes.
Crazy.
So I believe he leads the league in touchdown passes with 39. So it's likely he's going to get over 40. So that'll be nice for Baker Mayfield. And in another season, he's probably an MVP candidate. But with the years that the other MVP candidates are having, he's just not talked about this year. So he goes under the radar, and I think he sneaks in as a prime playoff MVP because when you get Baker Mayfield going hot and get him on a streak, he is unstoppable because he can single-handedly win games by himself. And if he gets that streak going and gets on a hot streak, then I believe that he could take the Bucs all the way to the NFC Championship game, maybe even the Super Bowl. But we'll talk about that as the playoffs go on. As far as this game goes, the Saints are just another team that's beaten down and ready for the season to end. Spencer Rattler is a nice story. He's another raw prospect who's going to be a nice backup veteran quarterback and later on in later years, but he's just not there yet. And because of that, the Buccaneers have an easy win this week over a very downtrodden Saints team.
Yeah, that's actually, I didn't even think about that, but that is wild that, if you consider what he is to that team in those couple of weeks where he didn't have Mike Evans or Chris Godwin and what he was still able to do, the fact that Baker Mayfield isn't even in anywhere near the MVP conversation, guys like Jared Goff are getting talked about more than him, is absolutely mind-blowing. It really goes to show how much of a quarterback stat wins have become in recent years. Because I think if the Bucs are sitting at a record of 14-2 or whatever record you want to give from the Bills or the Ravens or the Lions, I think that Baker Mayfield is a top candidate. But because they're sitting more in that 10-7 area, he doesn't even get talked about. I didn't even realize it until you just said it. So it's crazy to think about. It really
he's near the top. I'm pretty sure he's leading the league.
I know. I completely agree. I think he is as well. And I mean, 5-touchdown game last week, 5 games in a row with 3+ touchdowns. Just insanity that he's not even talked about. But that's how it goes. So moving down the list a little bit further, we have an AFC West divisional matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs heading to Denver to take on the Broncos, and we split again in this one. Callan has the Chiefs in this one, but I'm taking the home team Broncos. And big thing of this one is a lot of the times when you have a rookie quarterback in a situation like this, in a win and in situation, a true win and in situation, because if they lose, it's very likely that they don't get a playoff spot, considering Miami and Cincinnati are right behind them. So it's a true win and in situation right here. When you have a rookie quarterback in a situation like that, a lot of the times, a lot of people and I would agree that you're probably pretty nervous going into that game, like as a fan and, of course, as the quarterback himself. But I was saying as a fan, but you're pretty nervous going into that game. But when you have a guy like Bo Nix, who for a rookie, he's a little older and much, much more mature, a lot more starts under his belt with all the starts he had at both Auburn and Oregon and all the big games he played in at both of those programs. I think that he's the one rookie quarterback in a while where you're not sweating at all. I think he's going to take the pressure on more than well enough, and he's going to be able to go out and get his team a win. And not to mention, he's not facing a full-strength Chiefs team. They've already got the 1-seed lockdown. There's no reason for them to play any starters. Barely a reason for them to play their backups. I mean, they are the 1 seed. They're going to have another bye week in the first week. In fact, maybe they play their starters for like a quarter or a half because you don't want to let your starters sit for 2 weeks and get cold. But that's a coaching decision. We'll see how Andrew Reid wants to play that. But even if they do play their starters for a little bit, or if they play their backups the whole game, I still think that Bo Nix goes out there and has a really good game, and the Broncos pick up a win and the 7 seed in the AFC.
Yeah, it could be. It depends on how Bo Nix plays, but I like the Chiefs in this one, even though they are playing their backups, because really the Chiefs are just a pretty dominant team, and they always find ways to win. And I think they'll find a way to win this game because their starting quarterback is going to be Carson Wentz, who's going to look to go out there and perform well because, well, this is his one chance to play this year, more than likely. So
Yeah.
he's going to go out there.
I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan, you're really hoping it's his one chance to
Yeah,
play this year.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think he's going to go out there and play a really hard game. So I think he's going to go out there and perform really well. So because of that, I expect the Chiefs to win this game as they kind of get into the groove of going into the playoffs and they go in with some momentum. I think that they'll still run out there Isaiah Pacheco and get him a lot more field time this time around. Since it is a game that doesn't matter, they can kind of break him in like they've been wanting to and see if he can retain that lead back role over Kareem Hunt. And if not, then Kareem Hunt is the starting running back who's turned out to be quite the midseason pickup and quite the savior for the Chiefs team because that running game hasn't missed a beat since Pacheco's been out. And because of that, I expect the Chiefs to win. They have really put together a very solid defense. Again, Steve Spagnuolo is underappreciated as a defensive coordinator, I feel like, because he has put together multiple Super Bowl caliber winning defenses in multiple years. So he puts together another fine defensive effort against the Broncos this week and look for the Chiefs defense to pull out the big victory.
Yeah, this should be a hell of a game regardless, no matter who's playing. But yeah, I to be honest, I'd be kind of surprised if we saw either Pacheco or Hunt. I think you sit them both and let whoever their third and fourth string is go and let both of those guys get some rest.
Yeah, but it seems like they haven't been playing Pacheco. Like they've been afraid
not near as much.
And that's why I think they use this game to be like, okay, let's see how much you can handle.
Yeah, what's your workload? Let's find where you're really at right now. No, that is a good point. That's a good point. So now moving down to the final game on the list, and the only true primetime game we technically have, I guess, this week, with the Sunday night football game, we have the battle for not only the NFC North, but for the NFC 1 seed, which has to be definitely the first time since the 7 seed playoff structure that's happened, and probably one of the first times in playoff in general that's happened, that the same team, or the two teams from the same division, were also fighting in the final week of the year for the 1 seed. Crazy stuff. But nonetheless, we have the Minnesota Vikings heading to Detroit to take on the Lions, and we split on this one. I, of course, have the Vikings, but Callan is sticking with the Lions.
And this was a tough one to pick. I went back and forth, but I ended up going with the home team in this one. And that's just basically as like a 51-49 over-under kind of deal, where I just gave them that little slight edge because they're the home team. So I think it's going to be one of the most entertaining games of the year. Sam Darnold should be getting MVP votes. I just talked about Baker Mayfield flying under the radar. Sam Darnold has flew under the radar with his first ever winning season. And boy, did he really pick a time for his first ever winning season of 14 wins already?
14 wins, even if we lose.
Yeah,
we're 14-2.
Or even if you lose, 14-3. So 14 wins for your first ever winning season is pretty good. Pretty damn good.
Decent, yeah.
So if Darnold is able to go out there and play like he did against Green Bay, I expect the Vikings to actually win this one. But the Lions have held that number 1 seed almost all season. I don't think they give it up here. They want those home games in Detroit. I think that they really fight hard for them. And even though they are a beat-up team, look for Dan Campbell to go for it on multiple occasions and look for that to be the difference maker in what will be a very, very entertaining and a very intense battle.
Yeah, last week against the Packers was Sam Darnold's best game of the season. It's inarguable. He did have the one interception, that one blemish, but what he was able to do throughout the whole game, was so impressive. But more than anything, the stuff that really differentiated this game for him compared to other games was what he was able to do in crunch time. Those 3 completions on that last drive to run the clock out were such simple little completions, just little PA boots, but they were all so spot on. They were all so perfectly timed. And he might have shorthanded that last one a little
third down one wasn't.
But nonetheless, considering the pressure he had in his face and the pressure everywhere, the pressure around that play, shorthanding it even a little bit, he got it there. He got it to him enough so that Cam Akers could make that catch. Was it pretty? No. Was it there? Yes, in a way. But he got it there. He made it so Cam Akers could make that catch and close the game out. But overall, it was just his best game of the season. And I think that he follows the game up like that with another game. You saw how much they supported him in that locker room. If you saw the video, he walked in and that place erupted like a volcano. It was so cool to see as a Vikings fan the support that they put behind him. So I don't know how that doesn't keep you rolling. That doesn't get you the momentum into next week. I think that Sam Darnold has just as good of a game, if not better, and it is a huge part of the Vikings winning this game. It's going to be so fun to watch regardless. I mean, if you think about the last time they played, the Lions were able to get the better of the Vikings in US Bank Stadium. This is a very different Lions team. That Lions team was fresh off of losing Aiden Hutchinson, which is still to this day probably one of the biggest hits they took all season. But if you look at all the guys they have lost since that, I mean, you're talking David Montgomery, Carlton Davis, I'm blanking on his name, but there's Malcolm Rodriguez, their starting slot corner is out for the season now.
I can't remember his name, but
I believe Aleem McNeil is out for the season, if I'm not mistaken.
Out for the season.
I don't know if Brian Branch is out for the season, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be out for this game. I mean, these are not just players that they're missing. These are bona fide starters. These are bona fide stars on both sides of the balls that are just not going to be there anymore. So even with it being in Detroit, it's going to be a battle. There is no doubt about that. It's not going to be a blowout either way, I don't think. But I do see the Vikings just barely eking out a win and coming out on top. I said it from the start of the year this year. Callan I think I said it on camera at least a couple of times, but I said it to Callan so many times. I said since the preseason that this year has 2017 Case Keenum vibes. I said it so many times. Did I actually think it would come to fruition? No. Did I hope? Yes. But did I actually think it would? No. But it is almost word for word of the storybook of
and
2017.
Let him walk at the end of the season.
And I think we just let him walk. To be honest, I think it's smarter to let him walk. I don't a Cinderella season like this doesn't get recreated. I love Sam Darnold, and what he's done for this season for the Vikings this season is just completely unarguable how good he's been. But can he do it for multiple years in a row? Time will tell. If we keep him in the offseason, if we let him go, who knows? There's just so many what ifs around it.
Franchise tag him.
But I'll stop looking too far in the future. I'm always too far ahead. I'm always months ahead. Let's focus on the now, and let's focus on getting this 1 seed. Skol Vikings. Oh man, I am nervous as shit, to say the least. There's no doubt about it. I am pissing myself about this game, but I am excited, and I truly do think the Vikings have a chance at the 1 seed here. So that was our predictions for the final week 18 of the 2024 NFL season. It is so sad to say that we're already through the regular season, but much more of a happy it happened than sad that it's over type thing. Yeah. And now we just have, only the most exciting games of any point in the season.
30 games.
The final games right here. Your wild card weekend is probably one of my favorite weekends just because the matchups are so crazy and you still get a good number of them. But of course, the pressure only raises with each game. So make sure you stay tuned in until next week, when we probably won't really do much of a reaction about the week 18 games, because there won't be much said reaction-wise that won't be said prediction-wise for the wild card games. So expect just one episode next week as well, but it should be an awesome episode, as it will be our wild card weekend predictions. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.